that probably some of it you may know, but not necessarily all of it. We'll learn some interesting things, how to do certain things associated with the high holidays, some traditions that some may or may not know. Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is called Rosh Hashanah. Why is it called Rosh Hashanah?
Head of the year.
The head of the year. It's a strange name. Right? What do we say in English?
New Year.
The New Year. So what's this head year thing? The Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. Oh, you ever thought about that?
It always confused me that
Just-
March, the Passover.
To say in Hebrew it should be Tchilat Hashana, the beginning of the year. Well, first of all, the truth of the matter is that biblically it's not the beginning of the year, because biblically it's the 7th month, not the 1st month, right? The head of the beginning of the year is actually the month of Nisan.
Correct.
It's the head of the year, which means that the head has a few attributes with it. Number one, it's the head of the body, it's the top of the body. It also controls whatever happens in the body, right? You ask any neurologist, and they'll tell you that whatever happens in the body is associated with the head. But also the head, also whatever happens in the body is affected by the head. I recently went to visit. There's a place here called Aviv Clinic. You're familiar with that? Aviv Clinic is a clinic in the villages here. They have 3 such clinics in the world. One is here in the villages. Where would the other 2 be? Israel and
New York.
nope. But you're right about Israel. Israel is the founder of it. The 3rd place is Dubai. Yes. So there's 3 places in the world: Israel, Dubai, and the villages. Right. So go figure. So I got to know them. They are the name Aviv. They're based out of Israel. That's where the founding is. The doctor. The idea is basically that they have a way of bringing oxygen to the brain, and this is a therapy that helps. That by bringing oxygen to the brain, it helps the entire body. This is they've been working on this. Is a relatively new type of therapy that they have. It's supposed to help people that have had strokes, PTSD, things of that nature. It's used very much in Israel. When I was in Israel now, because I got to know the people working here in the villages, so I said, I'm going to Israel. I'd like to go visit them as well. And so I went. They're in Tel Aviv, close to Tel Aviv, and I went to visit their center there. It's a huge center, much bigger than they are here. It's two big buildings. And they have it's you should go visit it. It's very interesting. It's almost like a spaceship. It looks like it's like an indoor spaceship where they basically are pumping oxygen into the room while individuals are sitting there. Anyway, it's a hyperbolic chamber. That's exactly what it is. Anyway, the point is not to give a class on that. We are going to have actually a guy come and teach about that from there in November. But what I want to take from there is that the idea is that strengthening the oxygen in the brain actually helps the rest of the body, and that's the concept that they have there. So anyway, give me a second.
Believe it or not, I think it was on PBS. They had a special on
Yeah, it could be. They're starting to become much more known. They're looking now to open up a branch in New York. Anyway, so we're getting a little off topic, but the point is that's why it's called Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. It's not only that it's the beginning of the year, but it is the head of the year, meaning that whatever happens in the year is affected by Rosh Hashanah, by whatever happens during this time. So that is the very first aspect of it, that to know that it is the head of the year. Once we know that it's the head of the year, we now understand why we are so careful and meticulous of everything that's done during this time. Because just like in the head, you have to be very, very careful, right? You make a mistake in a surgery in a foot or a hand. Obviously, it's not a good thing, but it's not detrimental, right? You make a mistake in something in the brain, it's detrimental. And the same thing with Rosh Hashanah. A regular day, certain things that happen, okay. But Rosh Hashanah, that affects the entire year. And that's why people are very careful with everything that's done on Rosh Hashanah, that it should be in the utmost best possible. That's why some people are careful even to try not to sleep during the day, to say Tehillim Psalm all day. So now we're going to see there's some things that we do on Rosh Hashanah that all are associated with the uniqueness of the day. Now, the first thing that we do is the mitzvah of the day. Every holiday has their mitzvah, their specific mitzvah. In other words, there's traditions, there's customs, and then there's a biblical command. The biblical command is the shofar. Okay, now the shofar, you listen to the shofar, as you see, the mitzvah is to hear at least 30 blasts. But what is that, or usually 100? But what's this idea of 30 blasts? What's this idea of the shofar? And where does it come from, and the different sounds that we have? I actually have shofars here. If anybody wanted to try it, if anybody's interested. It's not. These are really hard to blow, these shofars.
You gave us something like that. I think I can use like that one.
Yeah.
I know, that's it.
These are really hard to blow, but if you want to give them a try, mine are a little bit easier.
So you can use that.
The smaller, the harder it is. But anyway, but the point is that I want to show you the sounds of how it's meant to be. So the Torah tells us like this. The Torah tells us, how do we know? The Torah tells us that Rosh Hashanah, which it doesn't call Rosh Hashanah, it calls it a Yom Teruah, a day of Teruah. Teruah means a sound of blowing the shofar, right? Teruah is it's a shofar sound. Teruah. Now, how do you know what the sound is? So, the Torah tells us 3 terms of shofar. It says that you shall blow the shofar, and then it says there shall be the sound, and then taviru shofar, again you shall blow the shofar. So the Torah, it's actually referenced when the Torah refers to the Jubilee year, when the shofar is blown on Yovel, where it says, you shall blow it, you shall sound it, and you shall blow it. It's not the exact translation, but that's basically what the Torah says. So we see that it has to be a blow, a sound, and then a blow. What is that sound? We know that there's a straight sound, which is a teruah. Teruah means a long sound. But then there has to be a broken sound. Now the problem is, it's not clear what that broken sound is. There's two sources. There's 2 sources of the sound, whether it is a wailing sound called shivarim, or whether it's a sobbing sound. Interesting enough that the biblical source for a sobbing sound comes from the mother of Sisera. You know who Sisera was? Sisera was a general who was fighting against Deborah, and his mother, it says, was sobbing for him to come home. So that's one source of what the sound is, but perhaps it is the shivarim sound, which we have another source that it should be a shivarim sound. And this is where it comes a question. When the Torah says you shall have a crying sound, which sound is it? So these are the 2 options. So the tekiah is easy; it's a long sound, right? It's a long sound. But then it comes the shivarim, which is shorter sounds, or which is a broken up sound, which is a wailing sound, like right? So that would be 3 of those sounds, or maybe it's right, like a crying sound. So that would be. Right? So which one is it? And our sages had this dilemma going all the way back.
What else is new?
What else is new? Or it could be both together. So this is why they came to a conclusion that we should do all 3. So therefore we do like this. We do first tekiya, which is the long. Tekiya is a long sound. Shvarim is the 3 shorter sounds. And then teruah is 9 of the very short sounds. Tekiya, shvarim, teruah, then tekiya. Tekiya, shvarim, tekiya, tekiya, teruah, tekiya. Now people that blow shofar, a lot of them know this, that these are the sounds. What a lot of people don't know is a few things associated with these sounds. Number 1, they all have to be separate. You have to breathe, you have to take a very short breath between each one, because it has to be clear that they're separate. The exception to that is the shavarim and the teruah, which you see, shavarim, teruah, which they actually have to be together, either with a very short breath or without breathing between them at all, because they are seemingly possibly meant to be one sound together. Now, when that's done, the tekiya has to be as long as the middle one. So again, you have the tekiya, the middle, and then the tekiya. See that? So the tekiya on each side has to be as long as the middle one. Which means that when you're doing the first one, tekiya, shvarim, teruah, tekiya, the tekiya on each side has to be as long as the shavarim and tekiya and teruah together. What does that sound? So it's 3 short sounds times 3. So there's 9 teruah sounds, and then 3. Then each of the middle-sized ones has to be the sound of 3 short ones. So it has to be the size of 3 short sounds. Now the short sounds you can do as many as you want, but the 3 shorter ones have to be limited to 3 or 4 maximum. Following me? So here's an example. First we're going to do a long one. So now what I did was the tekiya before and after had to be as long as both of the middle sounds combined. Now, when in the next, and you do 3 like that, 3 sets like that. Now when you do in the next set, so you're only going to do a tekiya only has to be as long as the middle one. So it only has to be as long as this. Right? So then the tekiya only has to be that long. So that's why, if you may hear when I'm blowing the shofar, that some may sound longer than others, and it's hard to measure exactly, but at least you know the minimum amount. And then you have the same thing with the teruah. It has to be as long, at least, as the minimum amount of teruah, which is the amount of 9 short sounds. Okay? So, and you'll do 3 of each of those. I'm not going to blow all 30 now, but we're just going to do 1 set of each of these. So that's that. And sometimes when I hear people blowing shofar, now you guys can try. You each have a shofar. You can give it a try. And when I hear people blowing shofar, okay. Good, you got it.
That was a duck sound. I did that myself.
You're not
Duck
getting
sounds all week for the
So the first thing is to be able to get that. These are actually. Yeah, the small ones are harder to do. Anyway, but this, so when I hear, even I hear professionals getting up in synagogues and blowing, and they say tkiya, and they go doo, and no, that's not long enough, right? Tkiya, no, that's not a tkiya, right? The tkiya has to be the length of the ones in between, right? And they do teruah. No, that's not. You got to do at least 9 sounds. So this is why it's important. And I encourage others to go and blow shofar for other people on Rosh Hashanah, because there's no way that everyone's going to hear a shofar. But it's important to know what is the proper way to blow shofar. So to know those rules, it's very simple, which is we do the first set has to be as long as the tekiya has to be as long as whatever is in middle. Now, if you decide to do, 100 short sounds, which you could do, doesn't mean that the tekiya has to be as long as 100 short sounds. It has to be as long as the minimum of those short sounds, which is at least 9 sounds.
But the sounds themselves all have to be distinguished.
Correct.
You can't just do 100 long sounds.
Correct. That's why I said you need to take a breath in between,
Right.
which is another thing when I hear people blowing shofar and they try to do it real fast and the sounds are just going into each other. And no, each one has to be distinct and you have to take at least a short breath in between each sound. Okay, now let's go on some of the reasons for shofar. So what are some of the reasons of the shofar? Why we blow? So, number one, as the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says, it's a wake-up call. Shofar is a wake-up call. Anyone coming in and blowing horns in the morning, that's going to wake you up, right? You should put in your phone the ring wake-up sound like the shofar. Surprised no one came up with that yet. It's a shofar wake-up sound.
Well, that's in the army. That's all they do.
Right?
They wake you up.
They wake you up.
They wake you up. I wonder
So-
if it started with the shofar.
Maybe.
Just
Well,
follow
there's a biblical command to blow trumpets actually when you go to battle. Do you know that? Yes, you're supposed to blow trumpets when you go to battle. I actually saw there are some people in Israel trying to revive that mitzvah of blowing trumpets. Anyway, but the idea about the wake up over here is to go to an internal battle, which is to do teshuvah. To wake up, it's a time of repentance. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's a time to do teshuvah, to wake up our souls, to bring us back to who we are. We need that wake-up call. Another reason for shofar, which is again where we see the concept of trumpets, similar to the idea of trumpets, because it says, the Torah tells us the term, b'chatzotzrot v'kol shofar, hari l'fnei Malach Hashem. With trumpets and the sound of shofar, you shall sound before God. So what does it mean with this? It means that the shofar is like the trumpets, coronating God, because Rosh Hashanah is the day of God's coronation. What does it mean, coronating king?
Well, they do it in England too.
They do it in England. We learn, that's really the closest thing to monarchy is what we have in England.
Right.
Because any other monarchs are really dictatorships today. We don't really have a monarchy. The closest thing that we have is in England. And yeah, when you make the coronation with the trumpets and everything, the whole spiel. And so Hashem is becoming our king in Rosh Hashanah. What does it mean? Doesn't mean Hashem, God's becoming our king. It means that there is a new, invigorated energy that's coming with the new year, and God is renewing his commitment to not only to his people, but to the world. Why is Rosh Hashanah that day of the renewed commitment? Because what is Rosh Hashanah is a birthday of someone. Whose birthday is on Rosh Hashanah? The very first man, Adam, and Eve were created on Rosh Hashanah. Right? So the birthday of man is on Rosh Hashanah. So it's the day that God is recommitting to man and to purpose and to our purpose in this world. And so that's why we call it Coronation Day. All these things, by the way, are mentioned as well in our prayers on Rosh Hashanah in the Musaf, which I don't know if which we'll hopefully get to soon. The another reason is memory. The shofar. So how is shofar memory? Because a shofar is a reminder of certain things associated with the shofar. One thing that's associated with the shofar is the binding of Isaac. Why is binding of Isaac associated with the shofar? Because what happened after the binding of Isaac? It says, Abraham lifted his eyes and he saw a ram. And so we have a ram's horn. That's why we specifically try and take a ram's horn. There's some that take those really twisty ones. That's called a kudu. Yeah. That is a kosher shofar, but the preferable one are these, which are taken from a ram. And so if you want to know why we don't have the custom to use those, is because we like to use preferably a ram's horn. Another thing that's remembered is another period in history when shofars were used. When else did you have the sound of the shofar? That we want to remember, a good time that we want to remember. What do you say?
A warning signal.
I'm by the memory still. What's the memory?
They would call the tribes to get together and move.
Well, what really significant moment in history do we find that the Torah tells us that there were the sounds of the shofar?
When we marched around
Jericho, yes, that as well. But I'm referring to a time before that. Mount Sinai.
I was just going to say, but
Mount Sinai.
But
The sound. It says the sounds of the shofar at Mount Sinai.
It wasn't Moses called them to come to the base of.
Oh, he called them, but it says that what in the morning it says there were sounds of blasts of shofar, and by Mount Sinai, and so what we want God to remember, that's a good thing. We want God to remember Mount Sinai again, talking about recommitment to us and to God and to the Jewish people and to the entire world. That's what Mount Sinai is, about bringing about the purpose of creation that's associated with Mount Sinai.
Was that Joseph?
And no, Mount Sinai, Jewish people with Moses, yeah.
Well, I know, but Moshe was there with the
Moses, Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai.
Right, okay. No, because I know he called Joshua. He called Joshua to come and get the people.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, he called Joshua then. Yes, Joshua, right. And as you mentioned as well, that the shofar was used as well when it came to the city of Jericho. We also, as you see here, we also find this to be a warning of judgment. To say that judgment is here, this is similar to the first point, the wake-up call that reminds us that it's a time to do teshuvah. Again, these are really associated with one thing, which is God's commitment to us and our commitment to God. That's what teshuvah is. It's our commitment to Hashem on this day, and God's commitment to the world to give us another year, to have another opportunity to use our life that God has given us. And it's also a future redemption. It foreshadows the great sound of the shofar of redemption, as Jeremiah tells us that in the time when Mashiach comes, it's going to be the sound of the great shofar. Tikah b'shofar gadol l'cheirotenu, Yeshayahu, Isaiah says, blow the sound of the great shofar for our redemption. And so that's also a future hope. All these verses that we mentioned are all referenced in our prayers on Rosh Hashanah, in the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah. And when we reference these prayers, we actually blow shofar 3 times during the Musaf prayer and the silent prayer, and then we blow another 3 times during the repetition of the Amidah, and then 1 during the Kaddish. So we're going to blow shofar another 7 times when we are referencing these verses of what the shofar represents during the prayers on Rosh Hashanah. So this all is associated with the shofar, and that is, of course, the main mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. And you can do the entire Rosh Hashanah, but if you don't have the shofar, you miss the main thing, right? That's the meat and potatoes of Rosh Hashanah, is the shofar. You can have all the apples and honey, but without the shofar, you're missing the meal. You're missing everything. That's the main thing. So, you talked about France. My sister lives in Nice. What they do, they go to services in the morning. They pray in the morning, but not everyone's going to services, unfortunately. How many people are coming over here? Let's say 100 people are coming. Even let's say between all the temples here, 400 or 500 people are coming to synagogue services. How many Jews are here? A few thousand. So so you want to try and reach them. So over there, they go, the French Jews, whoever doesn't go to synagogue, they go in the afternoon. They go along the Riviera to do the Tashlich. And she says they just stand there and they just blow shofar hundreds and hundreds of times for anybody that's there on the Riviera, all the Jewish people on the Riviera. So that's the main thing. The main thing is the shofar. Even if you didn't do any prayers, you did the shofar, you did Rosh Hashanah. Okay, now, as I said before, being it's the head of the year, so therefore there's other aspects of the holiday of Rosh Hashanah which we have to be very, very careful about. And included in that is what we eat. Because it's not only our prayers, but also what we're taking into our body is also important on Rosh Hashanah. Now, the most common one, of course, is the apple and honey. And that has a lot of that's very symbolic. And this goes back, to the Machzor Vitri, hundreds of years, this custom of eating apple and honey. Apple, it's supposed to be a sweet apple, by the way. And we dip it in honey. It's the idea of sweetness and comfort. And when we say it, we dip it in and we say, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will, shetechadesh aleinu, that you shall make for us a new year, Shana tova u'mituka, a good and sweet year. So this is where the idea is, and we bless each other as well. You should have Shana tova u'mituka, you should have a good and sweet year. What's the idea of a sweet year and a good year? So you could have things that are good, but it may not be tangibly good. You may not see it necessarily. When something is sweet, something that's savory, you have to the savory flavor, even though it could be a good flavor, but it could come with some bitterness. Now, there's maybe some positive to bitterness. Some people like the sharp flavors, but we want it to be sweet in a way that you could enjoy it and appreciate it and love it, and not have to go through the challenges associated. So even if something's good, you want to feel the sweetness as well. That's the idea of sweetness. But there is other aspects of our food diet on Rosh Hashanah that we do. With the Jews, everything's associated with food, right? So everything's going to always be food.
Or they won't come.
or they won't come, or it just can't be a holiday. Even when it comes Yom Kippur, it's about what we don't eat, right? So there are other things, and some of these may surprise you. Some of these you may know, some of these you may not know. Another thing is the round challah. The round challah, as opposed to the long challah, symbol of wholeness. It represents the cycle of life, which is renewed on Rosh Hashanah. Also, the round challah looks like a crown a little bit, which that represents, we talked about the day of coronation of God as our king. So that represents God's crown. Some people add raisins and honey to the challah for extra sweetness, again, because we want to associate it with the sweetness. It's interesting that honey comes from what? Bees, right?
And flowers.
Bees.
Oh, bees, yeah.
Bees. Honey comes from bees, right? Which stings. Bees could sting. So we want to also recognize that even things that could sting could bring out the greatest honey as well. So another very interesting thing about honey, which I heard recently, honey is the only food that is made as a group. Right? A group of individuals, in this case a group of bees, coming together to create something. And this is a good symbol of the community associated with the time of Rosh Hashanah, community coming together. I thought that was a very nice lesson that we learned from the honey. The next thing that we see is pomegranates. Now, I was recently in Israel. You see a lot of pomegranates there. Pomegranates could be a very delicious fruit. It could also be a very messy one if you're eating it with a red shirt. So you got to be careful. And if I had a pomegranate, we could talk about high holiday hacks and how to cut a pomegranate properly, which we probably won't be doing here, cutting it properly. But the proper way to do it is to cut off the top and then to move your way around. But anyway, pomegranate. Why do we have pomegranate? Pomegranate has many, many seeds that are edible seeds. And that represents having a lot of mitzvahs, an abundance of mitzvahs. The Talmud says, Yisrael Malayim mitzvahs kariman. Israel are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. We want to be filled with mitzvahs and with good deeds, just like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. And so that's the representation of the pomegranate, eating that on Rosh Hashanah to have good deeds. And some people say, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will, to be filled with mitzvahs like a rimam, filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Here's another one. To eat a head of, now it says fish/ram. Actually, the original custom is to eat the head of a ram. That's something that's very difficult to find rams in general, and especially to find the head of a ram. So we stick to the easier one to find, and that is the head of a fish. Now over here, if you come to our Rosh Hashanah dinner here, we serve a full fish. Some people get scared of it, they won't touch it, and some people love it. But there is a concept of eating a head of a fish. Why the head, specifically the head of a fish? That we should be shania, that we should be like a head and not a tail. And that's what we say, Yiratzah milfunecha, may be your will, that we be like a head and not a tail. Being like a head is a symbol of fruitfulness, leadership. The head of the ram, of course, reminds us of the binding of Isaac. But in general, also, eating fish in general is also not only the head, but fish. Because fish, what did Jacob tell his grandchildren about fish? When he blessed his grandchildren, he said, V'yidgu laro v'karavaros. You should multiply like fish. The fish are always multiplying. So we want to have multiplying of good deeds and good things. And that's also represented with the fish. So some of these things you may have heard of. Now let's look at some things that you may not have heard of. Carrots, marin. Now some of you have heard of tzimis that you heard of, but you don't know why we have the tzimis. The reason we have the tzimis is because of this, carrots. The real ingredient of tzimis, although we add sweet potatoes too, which is also a great addition to it, but the primary tradition of the tzimis is the carrots. Carrots in Yiddish is called merin, and I guess at some point in Eastern European tradition, they started saying merin, which also means to have more, to increase. They said merin the brachas, we have to increase our blessings, and so it became the idea of, and we even say Yiratzah milfanecha shenarbez choyatenu, may it be your will that we should increase our merits on Rosh Hashanah. And so it became the tradition to eat a dish associated with carrots. And that's where the concept of tzimis comes from. It is essentially a carrot dish, but in order to give it a little bit more flavor, we add some some sweet potatoes that also add to the thickness of it and the flavor of it, which is also, it's a good thing to add sweet potatoes because it's also the sweetness as well.
My mother used to put prunes in it too.
Yeah, people put prunes and all kinds of stuff. Again, you're adding more sweetness, but the foundation of the dish is actually the carrots, and so many people don't know that. Another thing is to eat dates, and some people put dates as well inside their tzimis. So what's the idea of dates? Dates in Hebrew is called a tamar. Tamar is related to the word yitamu, which means may it end, and some people say a prayer, may our enemies end, where we end off our enemies, get rid of our enemies. So in other words, this is sort of on the other side, looking to get rid of the accusing side. We want to get rid of that. We want to get rid of the Hamas and all the troublemakers for the Jewish people. And so the tamar, the dates, together with its sweetness, also has this aspect of yitamu, get rid of any challenges that's facing the Jewish people. Here's another one that anybody ever heard of this one? To have leeks. In Hebrew, the word for leeks is karti, and it's related to the word yikartu, may they be cut off. And again, we say prayer, may our enemies be cut off. That's the idea of having leeks. Another thing that's also brought down, by the way, all these are brought down in Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Beets. Did you know it's a concept of having beets on Rosh Hashanah? It's good for the blood flow. It's also good for the blessing flow. In Hebrew, the word beets is silka, which is associated with the word yistalku, which means may they be removed. So that means that our enemies shall be removed. And finally, gourds. I don't even know where you can find. Can you even find these? Yeah. I don't even know if you could buy them locally. But this also, the word in Hebrew for gourds is kara, which means to tear. So we say, may we tear up the evil decrees and proclaim merits. It could either read to proclaim or to tear up. So these are some of the foods that are brought down as what we eat on Rosh Hashanah. What we don't eat, you don't want to eat anything that's sour, that's bitter. So people try to avoid those type of foods. You don't want to eat. Some people try to avoid even things like lemons or things like that that bring sour taste. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't put any lemon flavor in your food, but you don't want that. You don't want any dishes like you don't want to have a lemon meringue pie, right? You don't want to have that's the main dish, or no lemonade. You have an apple pie, right? So these are some of the foods that are associated with Rosh Hashanah. Now, as we mentioned, we're very careful with what we eat. We also have to be very careful with what we say on Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, it's not enough to have our regular prayers, but we want to add special additions to our Rosh Hashanah prayers. So let's take a look at some of the additions that we add on Rosh Hashanah in order to help us bring about a good year. First of all, we use what's called a machzor, which is a unique prayer book for Rosh Hashanah. We add in something that sounds like this: Zachreinu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, v'tatzveinu b'sefer ha'chaim, which means remember us for life and inscribe us in the book of life. Uchtov l'chaim tovim, inscribe us in the book of life. How could God inscribe if it's a holiday? You're not allowed to write on a holiday.
Just telling him to remember too.
Just remember, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Kabarditchev once pointed this out. And he said in his prayer, he said, God, you're not allowed to write on a holiday. So after the holiday, when all the evil judgments are gone, you'll only have good things to write. But inscribe us in the book of life. Now, some people look at this and say, God is sitting up there and he's got a big book. He's judging and looking. Some people, a day of judgment. It's when we say inscribe us in the book of life, it means our book of life. Each and every one of us have our book of life that we are making the best of. God gave us this life, and we are inscribing for ourselves the best thing that we can. You see it in a positive way. It's not that the judge is sitting and giving us checks and minuses.
He judges us every day, so.
Judges every day, but it's also within ourselves. Like I said, it's to find our inner spirit, our inner purpose. That's what it's about. But remember us for the book of life. And then you also have the Netzana Tokev prayer, which is attributed to Amnon of Mainz, where there he depicts the judgment, who will live, who will die. But we remind ourselves in that prayer with teshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avir Torah ha'gzeira. Teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah avert the decree, any evil decree, and only bring good things. But there's another aspect to our prayer which we alluded to earlier, and that is in the Musaf sections where we reference the 3 parts of the shofar. And what are the 3 parts? Malchiot, the kingship, which we talked about. The shofar is about coronating God as our king, and we read 10 verses from Torah, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketuvim are writing, 10 verses that are associated with crowning God as a king, coronation day. We then read, we talked that shofar is a day of remembrance. The shofar brings about remembrance. And we read 10 verses which are about remembering. We ask God to remember all the great sages in history. We ask God to remember Noach. We ask God to remember Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We ask God to remember standing in Mount Sinai. All these things to remember, to reinvigorate the hopes for a good future by bringing inspiration from the past. And then finally we have shofar. We have 10 verses that are associated with the shofar. And as I said, after each section, we then blow the shofar. So you blow the shofar after each of these 3 sections in the silent Amidah. Then we're going to blow the shofar again after each of these sections in the repetition of the Amidah. So it's 3 and 3. And then one more time, we're going to blow the shofar during the Kaddish. Now, when we complete the prayers, there's actually one more time that we blow the shofar, another 30 sounds. And it's brought down, and that says right at the end of the prayer, and it's brought down that the reason that we blow these 30 sounds is in order to confuse the judging angels. How are you confusing them? They don't know it's Rosh Hashanah. It's also interesting because there's another custom. We blow shofar throughout the month of Elul, right, throughout the entire month. But it says on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the day before Rosh Hashanah, we don't blow shofar in order to confuse the administering, judging angels. So what do you mean you're confusing them? How are you confusing them? And so the answer is not that you're confusing them, that I don't know what's going on. What you're basically telling them is, like when we stop blowing right before Rosh Hashanah, you say, wait, they just blew for an entire month, and now they don't need the shofar anymore. And then when it comes at the end of prayer, it's like just the opposite. We just blow all the shofars, and we say, wait, we haven't yet finished. There's still more to bring. And then they come before God and they say, they're still bringing you more shofars. What's going on here? They're doing more than they were supposed to. And so we're bringing more merits upon us by doing more to the shofar in that day. Let's take a look at some other traditions and customs associated with Rosh Hashanah. Tashlich. Tashlich is a custom that originates from the 13th century from the Maharil. Maharil is one of the great sources for Shulchan Aruch, for the Code of Jewish Law. And many of the halachas and great traditions and customs go back to the Maharil. And the idea is that we recite it symbolically near water because we read from the prophet of Micah, who says, V'sashlich bimsolot yam kol chatosam. They will throw into the waters their sins. They will cast to the waters their sins. And so we're casting our sins into the water. It's also, we should try to make sure that water has fish in it. Because as we mentioned before, fish is blessing, it's an abundance of blessings. And it also represents God's watchful eye. The fishes, their eyes are always open, represents God's eye being open. Now, as you see over here, we point out many shake out our pockets as a symbol of getting rid of the sins from the pockets. What you're actually not allowed to do, and this is something that many people don't know, is you're not actually allowed to feed the fish. According to halacha in Jewish law, you are not allowed to deliberately feed stray animals on Shabbos or Yontif, unless you have a responsibility for those animals. But if you don't have a responsibility, you're not allowed to, because that would go under the category of muksa, because they are not relying on your food source. So you're actually not supposed to be feeding fish on Yontif. I know many people, the first thing they do is they say, Rabbi, where's the bread? Okay, first of all, when you're going to your neighbor's pond, you don't take bread and start dumping it in the pond. That's just not nice. But second of all, you're actually not supposed to feed them. You don't even know if bread is good for the fish. They have their food source. They're alive and well. Who says that your bread that's stale, sitting from 3 days ago, is what's the best thing to be feeding fish? So I used to go. We had the ducks also feeding them bread, but so anyway, that's something perhaps that it became almost like a thing, like we got to feed the fish, and there's actually no source to that. There's actually a source, the opposite, to not do it. So
You can't prevent it though, can you? If you're throwing bread in the water.
I don't tell anyone that doesn't ask me. I don't tell them not to do it.
Not to throw bread in.
Anyone that doesn't ask me, I don't tell them not to do it.
Like we're throwing bread in the water during Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
Supposed to. We're not supposed to.
I just said you're not supposed to.
So what are we throwing in the water?
You're throwing your sins in the water. If bread is your sins, then throw it in. But bread shouldn't be a source of sins.
So could we throw fish food?
No, we're not supposed to be feeding the fish, is what he's saying.
You're not supposed to feed stray animals on Shabbos and Yontif, because you're only supposed to feed animals that are relying on your food source. But if they're not relying on your food source, you're not supposed to be feeding them on Shabbos or Yontif.
So what do you throw in the water?
I throw my sins in the water. Symbolically, correct. Do you want me to put it out and show you what each one is? Yes. Right. You're standing next to the water and you're saying a prayer. The prayer, you're reciting the verses from Micah, which talks about casting sins into water. What did Micah mean when he said, "You shall cast your sins into water"? Right? Well, so I don't either know, but symbolically that's what it means. We also mentioned the idea in general of water, which water is associated with, a verse that we read there, Kimal har Hashem it says that the water will fill the earth with knowledge of God. The knowledge of God will be filled just like water fills the earth. Right? So water represents filling the world with knowledge of God. With the fish represents blessings. So water represents sustenance for life. It's a symbolic thing. It's a symbolic tradition and custom. And if you want to get really technical, it's obviously, as I said, it goes back hundreds of years. We know all the way going back to the Maril, and probably he brought it down before that. But there have been those who have disputed this custom in history, saying, "What kind of mishigas is this? You going to water or Rosh Hashanah? What kind of mishigas is that?" But obviously it's become an accepted custom, and we do it. But it's not about going and feeding fish. That's my point. That's not the purpose of the custom.
So where did the bread part come in? Is that conservative?
Yeah, it's associated with the movements of trying to do good deeds for Rosh Hashanah. So you want to do a good deed to the animals, which is a good thing. It's a good thing to help animals, but these animals are stray animals. They're not relying on your food source. So you want to feel good that you're doing something on Rosh Hashanah. It's just a feel good. It's nothing beyond that. It's nothing beyond but there's no source to that. So
that's where fish farming.
if they're animals that are relying on your food source, then you have to feed them, but they're not. So if we had here a pond, some people have that. They get a pond and they do that.
Did they have a pond?
They have a pond across the street.
But we don't feed the fish, we did last year, correct?
They're not our fish.
Correct, we didn't feed them.
It's not even a nice thing to do. You go to someone's pond and start feeding their fish. Who says that it's healthy for those fish to be giving them the food, whatever you're giving them? Maybe they have a specific diet.
Did you tell them when they sell the house they have to put a codicil in
that we get the pond? Yeah. Well, right now they took it off the market, so it's off the market. So it's either sold or.
They took it off the market.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
Maybe they'll come back and we can make it wrong. Isaac wants that to be his house.
Yes.
So do I.
I had wanted that. That's why we looked at it. We had that question, but it's obviously out of our price range at this point.
What are they asking?
3.2.
No, 2.5.
Oh, 2. Of course.
Yeah, much better than 3.2, right?
All of us put in a little.
Yeah.
The monthly payment.
Okay, looks like something.
Uphill.
Okay, let's look at a few more things. So there are, as you see, some people do shake out their pockets as a symbol. Some people shake their tzitzis, their strands of their tzitzis, and shake it. These are all symbolic things. Anyway, what else do we do on Rosh Hashanah? Greetings on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, we wish each other L'Shana Tova. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, we say Tikatev V'Techat. It's not coming. L'Shana Tova Tichatev V'Techatein. You will be written and sealed for a good year. Tikatevu in a male. There's a male and female version. Tikatevu is a male version. Female version is Tikatevi. which means the point is, if you want to say it in English, may you be written and sealed for a good year. Now, from the second day of Rosh Hashanah on, we change that blessing, and we then begin to say as follows: Gemar Chatima Tova, which means you shall complete a good sealing. You shall be completed as a good sealing. In other words, you already started inscribing, you already started on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. From the second day of Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, we say you should have a completion of a good sealing, Gemar Chatima Tova. Another thing of Rosh Hashanah is it's a holiday. And it should be seen as a holiday, as much as it's a serious day. It's also a yontif. Now, halachically, you're allowed to fast during the days of Rosh Hashanah, but at nighttime, you're not allowed to fast and you have to eat. But even so, many people hold that even though halachically you're allowed to fast, still you should not, and you should eat during the daytime, because it is considered a holiday. It's a yontif, and it's a day that we should celebrate and enjoy it. It's a special day that God gave us. It's not a day that you have to be sad, it's a day you have to be joyous. God gave us this day to reconnect, to re-inspire, to reinvigorate. And that's a specialty of Rosh Hashanah. That's a special day. Obviously, it's not like a secular New Year when we're going and popping champagne bottles and dancing and getting drunk throughout the night. It's a serious day, but it's also a joyous day. Our sages use the term that it should be tremble with joy. Tremble with joy. Like, what's an example? If somebody goes to a palace and you're invited to go to see the king, and you're going into the inner chamber of the king, it's very serious. You don't want to do anything too stupid, right? You have to be smart, be careful with what you do, but you also want to enjoy the lunch that the king is putting out for you. So it's a serious day, but it's also a joyous day. We have to stay positive. Avoid sadness, anger. It's a yantif. The previous Rebbe once said that for all the 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah, as much as we sit and pray and say and do all kinds of serious things, he says, the angels on high sit and wait on Rosh Hashanah that you should say another positive thing about another Jew. That's it. Just to say something positive about someone else, that's what the angels are sitting and waiting for all Rosh Hashanah. Many people sit in a synagogue and say, if I say the word more properly, better, if I scream the words louder, then that's what the angels want. No, he says the angels want to hear saying a good word about another Jew on Rosh Hashanah. That's what it is. That's what they're sitting and waiting to hear. Now, another interesting thing is that as much as it's a holiday, there is something that is lacking on this holiday, and that is we don't recite Hallel. Now, it's interesting. Rosh Hashanah, aside from being a holiday, in general, it's also what day of the month? Yes. So what does that mean? It's also Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh, normally you say Hallel. So if I was to give you a quiz, which Rosh Chodesh do we not recite Hallel? What's the answer? Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah, we do not recite Hallel. Right? Is that interesting?
Yeah.
Every Rosh Chodesh we recite Hallel. So aside for it being a holiday, now reciting Hallel, it's also Rosh Chodesh. We know in the temple they would bring a special offering for Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah, because it was Rosh Chodesh. But we do not bless the month, the Shabbos before, but we do the Tehillim. We say the entire Tehillim, but we don't actually bless the month of Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. Yes, that's correct. So it's also associated with that concept. We do mention Rosh Chodesh briefly in our prayers, but there's not much a mention of Rosh Chodesh. But Rosh Hashanah is referred to in Tehillim, Book of Psalms. It says, Tiku b'chodesh shofar, you shall blow in the month the shofar, b'keseh liyom chagenu, when it's covered up, the day of our joy. What does it mean that's covered up? There's something that is blatantly absent on Rosh Hashanah. What do you not see on Rosh Hashanah? The same thing that you don't see on Rosh Chodesh. The moon. The moon is absent. What does the moon represent? What does the moon represent? The moon represents the Jewish people, right? The waxing and waning represents the Jewish people, the moon. What's the only holiday that there is no apparent moon? It's on Rosh Hashanah. It's the only holiday that falls out on Rosh Chodesh. But it comes out Liyom Chagenu on the day of our celebration, which we'll have to get to in our next high holiday Hecht, which is going to be associated with the other holidays. We still have Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchas Torah to talk about. So we got a few takeaways. Number one, you have the shofar. The shofar is about doing tshuva, the wake up. The shofar, the other aspects of the shofar, we have food, which is almost, we're calling their edible prayers, the food of the day. Each one has something important. Tashlech and prayers, they help us get a fresh start. They help us focus in the right place and see the uniqueness of the day, the importance of the day. Of course, the foods, the idea of sweetness, the idea of renewal, the idea of blessing, the idea of trying to do more, the idea of trying to cut down our enemies, and then crowning God as a king with a hope for a sweet year ahead, and that we should take this day of Rosh Hashanah, take the blessings associated with the day, as much as it's a serious day, to also appreciate the blessings associated with it. And Rosh Hashanah also begins what's known as the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance, which begins on Rosh Hashanah and culminates with Yom Kippur. We'll talk a little bit about Yom Kippur in next lesson and next week, and we'll probably also get started a little bit about the holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot and Simchas Torah have a sheetload of stuff for Sukkot and Simchas Torah for us to discuss. So, thanks for joining us. We're going to end it here.